trust me with something. If you're in a small group, if you're in a Bible study, a Sunday school, any of those settings, I'm going to give you a challenge that will probably be one of the most impactful things. I'm going to say it's the most impactful thing y'all ever done as a group. In a minute, I'm going to tell you why. First of all, let me talk about what it is, why it's important that you do this, and then also what to expect. I do a lot of ministry, and I love sitting in a group setting discussing books of the Bible. Sometimes you have a pastor or author or a commentator who's written a book, and you use that in all those settings. That's great, that's awesome, that's wonderful. But what if at some point in every one of those situations you actually turned your chair around and started giving back in all the truth that you've been absorbing? What we are doing now, it's called a not-so-secret fraternity. You can say not-so-secret sorority, or if it's a mixed group, you can say a not-so-secret club. If you share your faith in some form or fashion, we'll talk about that in a minute, you get this little pledge pen, okay? The pledge pen is a little sword. You keep it in your pocket to remind you to give the sword of the Spirit, which is the Bible, out to other people. You got to earn your pledge pen. So once you get your pledge pen, you get to go to the bucket of fame. Got a bunch of pledge pens in here. You get to keep it, have it in your pocket. Now here's the thing. If you don't share your faith in some form or fashion the next week, this isn't like a free gift, salvation. You got to earn this. You got to work for it. We're just having fun, but you got to put your pledge pen back into the bucket of shame. So you got a bucket of fame, bucket of shame. Why is this so powerful? You and I have opportunities every single day just to give something out to somebody else, and yet we don't do it. When we have this little fun, not-so-secret fraternity or sorority, we have the pledge pens. Those opportunities are always out there, but we're more attuned to them. And by the way, if I meet on Wednesday night with a group and I get my pledge pen because I've already shared my faith, between then and the next week, I'm going to be sure to keep this bad boy, so I'm going to have to share something with somebody else. Here's the one requirement when it comes to talking to another person about faith, Christ. It has to make you a little nervous. It has to make you a little uncomfortable. That's the only requirement. So for some people, you may have a person that you work with, and they tell you about a difficult family situation. Let's say their mother is in the hospital. You could say, you know what? I wrote this verse down and I just want to give it to you to encourage you. You're going to get your pledge pen. If you have somebody else who says, hey, I want you to pray for me, kind of just generically, you could always say, even in the workplace, that person has invited you into their world. Well, hey, can I pray for you right now, right here? Put your hand on them, pray for them right there. You're going to get your pledge pen. You may get an opportunity to share your story with somebody else. The reason it's so good to share your story, it's not threatening. You're saying, here's what's happened in my life. The other person can't argue with it. Okay, it's a very effective tool. Let me give you some examples. A friend of mine named Jordan has a coworker. They were going to get lunch together. Normally they'd talk about football and all these other things, but my friend said, you know what, I'm going to be intentional to share my story with this other person. He does so. It was uncomfortable at first, but Jordan came back to Bible study almost strutting like a rooster because he's thinking, man, that felt good. Don't evangelize or share your faith when it hurts. Do it until it feels good, and it comes naturally. Story after story, everybody does something different. If you just want to share a verse with somebody, or you say, hey, I'm in a Bible study and here's what we learned last week, whatever it is, we're kind of sprinkling our conversations something related to the gospel. I'll say that again for emphasis. We're trying to sprinkle our conversations with something about the gospel. The history of what I'm talking about. A long time ago, this is the most ridiculous thing I think I've ever heard. People would say, it's important to preach the gospel and if necessary, use words. That's just terrible theology. When you read the New Testament, Jesus never said, go out and just keep your mouth shut and do the right thing, and people will magically come up and say, hey, I've noticed that you're a moral person, and can you tell me what's behind that? That's not going to happen. Do we back up with our actions what we believe? Of course we do. But at some point we have to verbalize who we serve, why we serve them, what the Lord's done in our life. So let's just push that off the table to say, preach the gospel if necessary, use words. That's just ridiculous. The second kind of step for some people, and this is true, 1 Peter chapter 3 says that we are to be prepared to make a defense for the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and reverence. Always be prepared to make a defense. The Greek word for defense is apologia. We call that apologetics. Apologetics is not to say I'm sorry for what I believe. That means you make a defense. So we're always ready to make a defense. There's a great place for that. But it's very rare that somebody just comes up to me or other Christians and say, hey, tell me what you believe or tell me your story. So can I sit back and wait on the opportunity to share my faith? Well, of course I can. Here's though where we get to that third step. Not the first one, not the second, the third step. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 16. Paul says, knowing that the days are evil. Come on, look around. Knowing that the days of evil, he doesn't say sit back and wait. He doesn't say hope that the opportunity comes. Here's what he says. He says make the most of every opportunity. That's all we're doing right here. Make the most of every opportunity. Now, what to expect? The first week or two that you do this, not a whole lot of pledge pens are given out. But when people start coming back to the group saying, hey, you know, I met somebody, I had a waiter or waitress the other day, and I asked how I could pray for them, and that engaged a conversation. That kind of rubs off on everybody else. And somebody else says, well, man, I can do that. I think so often we've made people feel guilty that they're not sharing the gospel from A to Z. But you know what? You're just starting somewhere. Here's one thing I'll leave you with. Hold on. What to expect? Oh, so the momentum will pick up. Another very important thing, if you don't have accountability, this is not going to happen. It's just not. When I know I've got to come the next week to a small group or a Bible study, I'm thinking when I show up, I'm going to share my faith. This is in my pocket to remind me. And so that momentum is going to start building, but I have that accountability in place. Number two, and please don't discuss this. Don't say, let me mull it over. Let me talk to somebody. Just do it. Just do it. Just start it because it's so effective. You have to make it sustainable though. Do it for 3 months. Do it for 1 quarter. I wouldn't even do it more than a quarter. I'd say, hey, for 10 weeks or for 12 weeks, this is what we're going to do. That way it's kind of doable, sustainable. Very last thing I'll say, in the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln had as his general of the Army of the Potomac was George McClellan. George McClellan was so good at having drills and making preparations and practicing all his formations. There was only one problem with George McClellan. He wouldn't fight. He wouldn't step out and apply all these things that he had been learning in theory. Please don't be a George McClellan. Or somebody like Henry Ford said, you can't build a reputation on what you plan to do. We got to get out there and just do it. Jesus said, for those who have ears to hear, let them hear.